In the early hours of June 6, 1944, reports began flooding German command posts along the French coast. Radar contacts, paratrooper sightings, and naval bombardments all pointed to one terrifying possibility. The long-awaited Allied invasion had begun. For months, German generals had debated where the attack would fall. Many believed it would strike at Pas de Calais. But when American forces stormed beaches like Omaha Beach, confusion turned to alarm. Field commanders sent urgent messages up the chain of command, some insisting this was a diversion, others fearing it was the main blow. Inside headquarters, officers reportedly muttered that the scale of the bombardment was unlike anything they had seen. Massive naval guns shook bunkers, communications faltered. What German generals said in those first moments reflected disbelief as much as fear. Some claimed the Atlantic Wall would hold. Others immediately sensed the gravity of the situation. The landings were not small raids. They were overwhelming. The shock was compounded by uncertainty. Were these landings the true invasion, or merely a feint to draw forces away from Calais? That hesitation would prove critical. As American troops pushed inland despite horrific casualties, German commanders realized the battle unfolding before them could determine the fate of the entire Western Front. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had long warned that Germany must defeat the invasion on the beaches, or lose France entirely. Ironically, he was away from Normandy on June 6th, visiting his wife in Germany. When informed of the landings, Rommel reportedly reacted with immediate concern rather than denial. He had studied Allied air superiority and naval strength and understood the imbalance. According to later accounts, Rommel believed that once the Allies secured a foothold, Germany's chances would shrink rapidly. He had fortified beaches with obstacles, mines and defensive positions, yet he knew no wall was invincible against such overwhelming firepower. His earlier statements echoed in hindsight. The first 24 hours would decide everything. German officers under his command recalled that Rommel frequently emphasized speed and decisive counterattacks. After D-Day began, he pushed urgently for armored divisions to be released toward Normandy. His reaction was not blind confidence but strategic urgency. Rommel's words, both before and after the landings, revealed a general who understood modern warfare's brutal realities, especially when facing American industry and air dominance. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the overall commander in the West, reportedly responded to the invasion with grim pragmatism. Early reports left him uncertain whether Normandy was the main thrust. Still, he understood the seriousness. When requests were made to release panzer reserves, authority rested not with him, but with Adolf Hitler. This centralized control caused fatal delays. Rundstedt is often quoted as saying, in later frustration, that peace should be sought because the war could no longer be won. Whether spoken on D-Day itself or later, his sentiment reflected a growing realization among German leadership that strategic momentum had shifted. American forces, despite heavy resistance, continued landing men and equipment in vast numbers. Rundstedt saw clearly that once Allied troops consolidated their beachheads, pushing them back would require resources Germany no longer possessed. His reported remarks conveyed both realism and resignation. In Berlin, Hitler was initially reluctant to believe Normandy was the main invasion, influenced by deception operations and convinced Calais remained the primary target. He hesitated to release armored divisions. Reports suggest that when informed, he viewed the landings as a possible diversion. German generals later recalled the frustration of waiting for permission while American troops secured ground. Hitler's comments reflected suspicion more than panic. He believed Germany still had the strength to crush the beachhead, but time was critical. By the time key armored units were mobilized, Allied air superiority hampered movement. German commanders privately worried that hesitation had squandered their best opportunity to repel the invasion at the shoreline. German officers overseeing coastal defenses had placed great faith in the Atlantic Wall fortifications. Yet D-Day exposed its limitations. Massive naval bombardments shattered bunkers and disrupted communications. Some generals reportedly admitted that no static defense could withstand such combined air and sea assault indefinitely. Their words reflected shock at the scale of Allied coordination. While individual strongpoints inflicted severe casualties, especially at Omaha Beach, the overall defensive system could not stop the tide. German commanders began acknowledging that mobility, not concrete, would determine the battle's outcome. At Omaha Beach, American troops faced brutal resistance from entrenched German defenders. Initial German reports described heavy casualties inflicted on the attackers. Some commanders believed the invasion there might fail. Messages sent inland expressed cautious optimism. But as hours passed and American forces broke through bluffs and defensive lines, those same officers realized the situation was deteriorating. What German generals said shifted from confidence to concern. The beach had not become the graveyard they had hoped for. German generals repeatedly commented on Allied air power. Fighter bombers roamed the skies, attacking convoys and reinforcements. Officers complained that movement by daylight was nearly impossible. Some described the air presence as paralyzing. The inability to maneuver armored divisions quickly prevented concentrated counterattacks. Their statements reveal how decisive air control had become. Airborne landings behind German lines added confusion. Reports of paratroopers appearing in multiple locations led some officers to exaggerate Allied numbers. German generals spoke of chaos in communications and disrupted defenses. The scale of airborne operations reinforced fears that Normandy was indeed the main assault. Even as fighting raged in Normandy, some German commanders insisted the true invasion would still come at Calais. Deception operations had succeeded. Generals debated whether to commit all reserves. This internal disagreement reflected uncertainty at the highest levels. Rommel and others urged immediate armored counterattacks. They believed speed was essential. German generals reportedly emphasized striking before Allied forces linked their beachheads. But fragmented command structures slowed action. As reinforcements poured ashore, German generals began acknowledging the scale of American logistics. Ships stretched across the horizon. Supplies landed continuously. Officers remarked on the industrial power backing the invasion. German field reports praised their soldiers' bravery. Defensive units fought stubbornly, yet higher command recognized that courage alone could not offset material imbalance. Statements from generals increasingly reflected strategic concern rather than battlefield confidence. Within days, some German leaders privately admitted the invasion could not be reversed easily. The Allies had secured footholds and were expanding them. Comments from senior officers suggested that D-Day marked a decisive turning point in the war. In post-war interrogations, several German generals described D-Day as the beginning of the end. They pointed to delayed decisions, Allied air supremacy, and overwhelming resources. Their reflections emphasized missed opportunities. What German generals said after the American landings reveals a mixture of shock, urgency, frustration, and eventual realism. From Rommel's warnings to Rundstedt's resignation, their words paint a portrait of a command structure strained by uncertainty and constrained by centralized control. D-Day was not merely a battlefield event, it was a strategic earthquake. And in the remarks of Germany's top commanders, one can hear the unmistakable recognition that the war's tide had irreversibly turned.